Welcome, everyone. We'll give it a few minutes for folks to digitally join us. We appreciate you joining us for this edition of PsychArmor Conversations, where we're going to be having conversations about the past, present, and future LGBTQIA plus in service and beyond. So give it a few minutes to allow some of our friends to join us, and then we'll get started. I see many of you joining us now from the waiting room into this meeting space. Very glad that you're able to join us. Keeping an eye on when it slows down for a bit. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started once again. For those of you who are just joining us, thank you for coming to hear this conversation. Conversations about the past, present, and future LGBTQIA plus in service and beyond. My name is Duane France, and I'm honored to be able to moderate this discussion with our panelists. I'd like to start with introductions. First, myself, I am a retired Army non-commissioned officer, combat veteran, and clinical mental health counselor, as well as the producer and host of PsychArmor's podcast, Behind the Mission. Obviously, I'm here to moderate this conversation. I do want to start off with a brief personal disclaimer. I am not a member of the LGBTQIA plus veteran community, but I am proud to support all veterans, and that definitely includes our LGBTQIA plus siblings who served. As a middle-aged, white, heterosexual, cisgendered male veteran with a college education who has stable employment and am suitably housed, I fully recognize that I have privileges associated with all of those intersectional identities. And I want to approach this conversation with total respect and cultural humility. And I invite all of you watching to be able to do the same. That being said, we want to ensure that this is a safe space for everyone to be able to share their own authentic self. If our moderation team sees that chat messages are deemed inappropriate or not conducive to a safe and welcoming place for all, then that will be cause for immediate removal from the webcast. My opinion and the opinion of the team here is if you advocate and support veterans, then that means all veterans, regardless of any intersectional identities that they may have. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, then we'll get into the conversation and have a discussion. First, joining us from American Samoa is Ariana Auva'a. Ariana is an Army veteran working with the American Samoa Government Office of Veterans and Military Affairs as the program administrator for the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant. Ariana is deeply involved in the Veterans Affairs and the Veterans Programming in American Samoa. Also joining us is Allison Jaslow. Allison is an Iraq War veteran and the Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and a dedicated public servant. As a former Army captain, Allison is a seasoned political and communications strategist, serving on the staff of several members of Congress and as a White House communications aide. And then finally, we are joined by Larry Etu-Robert, who served as a Navy chaplain in the Navy Reserves for 13 years and achieved the rank of lieutenant commander. He now serves as the Bereavement Services Manager and Veteran Liaison for Vitas Healthcare in Atlanta, Georgia. One more thing before we get started. At the heart of our collective mission is a deep desire to understand and connect with the amazing individuals whose lives we touch. That's where you come in. We would like for you to take part in a quick and completely anonymous demographic survey, which will be a game changer in keeping this remarkable program alive and thriving. So you will see a short poll. So those of you in the audience, if you could answer this poll and give us some feedback. We're going to give a few minutes for those poll results to come in. The reason we do this is that we're able to ensure that the impact of this work keeps growing, and you providing us this feedback will benefit countless lives along the way. So we'll give it another few minutes. Our team in the background doing all the wonderful tech magic will let us know when the poll is complete and pull that down. All right, I think we are good to go. So we will make sure that we provide that information to our team to be able to let us know who is in the audience a little bit. So as we mentioned, this is a conversation about the past, present, and future of supporting LGBTQIA veterans. To start off with, we're going to talk a little bit about the past, but also get to know our panelists a little bit more. I'm wondering if each of the panelists could share a bit about your military service and how it intersected with your LGBTQIA identity. We'll start off with Allison, and then we'll follow up with Ariana and Larry. Allison?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I would say, I'm glad that we have a variety of voices chatting here, because you'll learn that many of our experiences are so very unique. For me, the Army was my dream. I put it up on a pedestal when I was 13. And I went to school on an ROTC scholarship, and didn't really start to, let's call it, awaken to the fact that I was gay until just before I got out of the military. And when I was largely in a place where I psychologically was ready to let go of that dream. And as I've sort of worked through my coming out process, one of the reflections I had is, because I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, when you're an 18-year-old and that's your dream, that's the only thing you've ever wanted in your life. And you have to sit there and you have to initial against, the types of behavior that you are not permitted to exercise in or even think about exercising. I have to wonder whether I just didn't even let myself go there, during the times when many people are sexually awakening, right, in college. And so for me, I have sort of like a complicated relationship with my military service. I was pre Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but I wouldn't consider myself closeted. And also wonder whether that policy, sort of gave me subconscious incentive not to even understand or know myself in that way. And so that's, for me, my military service is just sort of like, it's a part of the narrative of who I am just generally. And I'm now, an advocate on the national stage for our community. But I just have like sort of this complicated tale of not really being gay when I was serving, but wondering whether I would have been had Don't Ask, Don't Tell not have existed, if that makes sense.
Right. The opportunity to fully express yourself wasn't there in the first place. And so it was yet another barrier to keep you from identifying yourself or even recognizing that part of you. Ariana, your experience was very different, as Allison alluded to.
Thank you. My experience was also different, not that and I acknowledge everyone from the community's experience. Joining the military was also a dream of mine, because I come from a military family that has served across the United States military in all different branches. But I transitioned early, being a transgender woman, or a Fafine in Samoan. I was always told that, the military is not for you or for people like you, because of certain laws like don't ask, don't tell, and just how people in general are. So I waited. I didn't wait, but I realized that as I was growing older, that my time was coming up. So after winning pageants and crowns and becoming involved in the local film industry, the fashion industry, I was like, I still want to do this, because this is where my heart is, and I want to join the legacy of my family and being service members. After joining, I I was more of a trial run as the guinea pig for the base that I was in, being the first transgendered person to transition in that post. So I can say that I was a guinea pig, because from the paperwork to the medication side of things, everything was just being tested on me. And but I realized, as I came out and wanted to transition in service within this post, I was able to help open doors and create a community for transgender folks that were also serving. And I was able to get out to um, my story that was being told by the care team to these folks that were seeing the doctors privately. So they were able to come out little by little and transition openly and have a person there that they can go to. So we created kind of like a little group and a little family that we were able to help each other out. But that's how I knew that my coming out and my story really helped because I was able to help those as they were able to help me as well, and finding a community within the Army.
And I think that it's very difficult, and even at this day and age, and this, is fairly recently, the need to be a first, right? We're looking at firsts, and someone has to be the first, and it's often not easy to be the first. And being the first means many other people didn't have the same opportunities before. So
Right.
thank you for that. Um, Larry, you had a rather long career in the Navy Reserves.
Yes, I did. And first started as being married. So it wasn't really difficult to have be to be hiding, if you will. I was definitely out as a heterosexual male. The problem came when I decided, with uh, my wife's support, my ex-wife's support, and my children, that I was and always have been a gay male. With the acceptance of my wife and children in my process, I was very proud to come out, despite it being don't ask, don't tell during that time. And it was smack in the middle of that time. It was probably in, oh gosh, 95, 96 that my divorce was finalized. And I was proud of a new relationship that I had found. I was married rather quickly within a year of my divorce, uh, or partnered, let's put it that way, to a male, and was very proud of wearing my rainbow colored wedding ring. So I didn't care what other people thought. Uh, with being a hospice chaplain at the same time, I was working in a AIDS only hospice, if you will, working with the AIDS community very closely because of the crisis there. So I was like, you know, to the hell with anyone who doesn't accept me. There are thousands of people who are dying that don't feel accepted. So I, though faced discrimination nonetheless, but I felt it less compared to what other people, especially again in the medical community, were facing because of HIV and AIDS and so forth. So.
No, I appreciate that. And Ariana, I saw that you responded rather vigorously to Larry's I not caring whether people. I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts or reflections on what the other panelists might have shared.
I am so just now meeting you, Larry, but I'm very proud of what you just said. I don't care what other people think, because as humans, as we, whether you are trans, gay, straight, cisgender, that's how we should live our lives. Because if people's opinions and what people have to say about you should never ever be the direction of how you would live your life. It should never hold you down from your happiness, nor should it stop you, shall we ever let it dictate who we are and stop us from being great humans all around. So thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that.
Larry, I'm curious if that how that felt, but also was that a response that you were getting in the mid 90s?
No, it wasn't a response I was getting in the mid 90s, but I do appreciate her response. Most definitely. How can I not? But it's something, though, however tragic it was during that time, especially within the AIDS community, there was a lot of support by other gay and non-gay, lesbian, or LGBTQIA community members, and for us to really come out, and to be heard. And so we have a lot of support. So here in Atlanta, we had Aid Atlanta and a bunch of other different organizations and fundraisers and so forth, and working for an AIDS hospice, primarily the first one in the city of Atlanta, gave me a lot of support and determination as well. So it really shaped me today and who I am and what I am and how I'm able to advocate for veterans that are gay, and just for or just for people in the LGBTQIA community overall, period.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're also seeing some positive support and responses in the chat. For those of you who are watching this webcast, feel free, if you have questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. We're hopefully going to have a conversational discussion here, but if you have some thoughts and responses, our colleague Andrea definitely resonated with Allison's idea of not being able to, or even having the capability to express yourself. Talking also a little bit more about the past as we're approaching here into the present. We're having this conversation in 2024, and recognize the importance of Pride Month. We're curious, what are some of the most significant changes that you've seen regarding LGBTQIA acceptance and inclusion? We'll start off again with Allison.
I think one of the coolest things that's happened to me just in the last year is I was at Arlington for Memorial Day last year, and sitting in the back row of the auditorium where dignitaries come and speak. The president usually comes in, the SecDef, et cetera. I don't know if you guys have been there. Many people watch it on TV, but there are members of the military there as well. And standing right in front of me was a Army officer, I think he was a lieutenant, and his male partner and their baby. And that's just, I hadn't borne witness to that since I had gotten out of the service, and it being just so commonplace. They were very comfortably amongst a whole bunch of other vets in the military community like that. And so, there's certainly a lot of work that remains, especially in terms of restoring justice to people who were unfairly treated by our country, for decades. But it's pretty cool to sort of take in how far we've come. And so that was an especially meaningful moment for me last year.
No, I think that is a very compelling image. Larry and I are of an age. I joined in '92, so we were serving in the military about the same time. And even to your point, Allison, personally, I don't know that 30 years ago that would have been conceivable, right? And where that was.
Oh yeah,
Larry, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, ironically, one of my favorite bosses used to make gay jokes in staff meetings. So the fact that in my adult lifetime, we can go from there to what I witnessed, just last year. It feels remarkable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry, I'm curious on your thoughts about where we've come to where we are today.
My nephew is in the Army, and he graduated boot camp, Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina, in February of 2018. And his drill sergeant was a Mr. Ken Ochoa, who was a trans drill sergeant for the Army, and has Ariana, do you know him or heard of him?
Okay. Yes, I do. We're Facebook friends, and we connected through Sparta Trans, and Mr. Ken is a very good mentor on my side as well. Love him.
So when I heard that my nephew had a trans drill sergeant, I can't tell you how excited I was. I go, what? How's that possible? And he was definitely revered. He didn't talk bad about him. If anything, because of it, there was an increased acceptance for a lot that you'd be surprised surprised of in the Navy, in the Army. And my nephew's telling me all these things. And again, I was so surprised. So when I went to his graduation in Columbia, South Carolina, which was very impressive, him finishing high in his class and everything like that, I said, I want to go say hello to your drill sergeant and tell him that I really appreciate what he's done and that he's a role model for me. And my nephew was like, no, don't say anything.
Never talk to the drill sergeants.
That's
never
talk to the drill sergeant. Yeah. So I said, okay, I won't. But I just wanted to, in some way or another, shake his hand, but I didn't, because my nephew was just terrified that I would, and he would get some type of retribution or something. But yeah, but that was impressive for me. It really was.
Yeah. Never mess with the drill sergeants, regardless of their identity. There is no reason to do that. So, Ariana, to wrap this up, curious for you where you thought we've come, obviously through your own service, but just through the LGBTQIA community.
I'm quite proud of the progress that we've made for the LGBT community. For my last 3 years of service, I worked in the 3ID in the protocol office I served under 3 commanding generals, and they just said I was the first transgender to be what they call the voice of the Marne, that speaks at all the different ceremonies within the division, and also ceremonies that were taken outside of our division. And just to see the support, that knowing that I'm transgender, they did not care. All they saw was another human, and they treated me as an equal. They treated me as someone that they can go to. They treated me as someone that they would, with so much respect. Like, they valued my opinion, they valued my work, and they never saw anything behind the uniform or outside of the uniform as well. Like, we became, some of the folks that I worked with are now lifetime friends, that on a weekly we are checking up on each other. We're looking to see how everyone's doing with their families, with their careers, and where they are at with their lives. And that's such a great feeling to have, that not only was I accepted as a trans woman in uniform, but also as a trans woman outside of uniform, and just to see past everything, the barriers that were once there outside of what society says, but people just saw the person for who they are, what they are, their ability in uniform, and also just the heart of the person to be genuine with each other. I have a funny story from when I first joined and going through basic. I had a cousin that was a drill sergeant in the same battalion as I. So when she found out what company I was in, she walked over to the company just to check on me. But I don't think it wrong, but she could have done a little bit more of research. But she came to the first sergeant of the company I was in basic with and told the first sergeant, hey, I have a cousin that's in, and she's transgender. I just want to make sure that she's okay. So she kind of outed me in my company, and with the drill sergeants, but with I never would have expected it. The drill sergeant and company commander and the first sergeant pulled me into the office, of course, with a battle buddy waiting outside, and were checking on me to see if I was okay. Was there anything that I needed? Because this is the time before the ban was lifted and trans people were allowed to serve openly, but they were trying to make sure that this person was okay. I was like, it was very comforting. And now I have 2 of my drill sergeants were Facebook friends and great cheerleaders, great supporters of mine with the work that I do in the government, and just the advocacy work that I do. It's such a warm and comforting feeling.
And as I've often said with these conversations about intersectional identities, the military is not known to be a very progressive organization or institution. However, some of those stories that each of you shared is not a common experience even in the civilian community. The widespread acceptance and the ability to be our full authentic selves is not the case. Larry, there was a follow-up question from someone in the chat regarding your work as an AIDS, working during the AIDS pandemic. We're going to move on a little to the present. I wanted to bring that to you. Feel free to respond to that in the chat because someone had a specific question regarding that. As we move on, I want to talk a little bit about the present, the way things currently are now. Especially when it comes to LGBTQIA veterans. I'm curious about what are some of the unique strengths and perspectives that LGBTQIA plus veterans bring to the broader veteran community. This was going to be for Larry, but I just threw him the question, so I'll pass it over to Ariana first, and then follow up with Larry. Ariana, some of the unique strengths and perspectives that LGBTQIA plus veterans bring to the larger veteran community.
For me, and I speak for myself, being where I am the only trans veteran that's present and active within the military community. Although we do have some members of the LGBTQ community that are veterans, but I am praying that they will join me and be as active as I am. But all I can do is share the information and with an open arm say, come join, we'll never force them. What we bring to the table is, as I spoke in San Diego, is the intersectionality that we're able to help open doors of the different treatments, the different help that is needed, from in all different areas and aspects. What could be done within the VA helps side of things, what should be done, and just learning more of people individually and learning more of people within their minority groups, because we would never know that someone in the LGBT community is requiring a certain type of help. Someone else might need the same type, but that they don't belong in this minority group or in this community, but they need the same type of help or service or care that I'm asking for.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important thing. Our friend and colleague, Lindsay Church, Minority Veterans of America, often says if you program for the margins, you're going to also improve programs for the majority. I've heard it expressed as addressing inequities for some populations benefits all populations.
Yes.
And I think that's really a critical point of view. So Larry, I'm curious about your thoughts on what some of the unique strengths and perspectives that LGBTQIA plus veterans bring to the larger veteran conversation.
Oh, most definitely. I think it gives them a voice as well. When people are accepting and are willing to share what's important to them, I believe then that people who have PTSD, who may have other issues related to military sexual trauma or whatever the case may be, any type of just, again, trauma experienced, they are able to share it because there's another group that have been able to share what was meaningful and powerful to them as well. So I think it's a model. When people see that there's a voice to be said and it's being heard, it gives people the power as well to say, well, I have something to say as well, and I need to share it. It's personal to me. So I think it's allowed for dialogue of all kinds related to that. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective, sort of this idea of, overcoming trauma. Trauma is possible to be overcome. We use the word resilience. We celebrate resilience, but we don't often recognize the trauma that creates that resilience, like something significant has to occur. So honoring both the experience of the trauma, but also recognizing that there's opportunities to share. Allison, I'm curious on your thoughts.
It's related to just being out.
Oh, it's some of the unique characteristics, and really what voices LGBTQIA plus veterans, how they can benefit the larger veteran community.
Well, I guess I'd say first and foremost, you know, some of the work that we do at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, because we're an advocacy organization, is helping to change the narrative and change the way that America sees its veterans and service members. And so I think that not only allows not just LGBTQ people but also like women to see that like somebody like myself who's leading a national veterans organization can in a world that is 85% male. But it also teaches the folks who would be subordinate to leaders that don't look like them, that those people can be their leaders too. And that Lisa Franchetti is just as capable of a joint chief's role as any of the men who came before her. And so I think the more many of us can be out there and change the way that what our leaders and our colleagues and our friends can look like, the more the broader populace in the military community will be more accepting of us, because it's normalizing it, right?
Yes, no, I think back to Larry's nephew of the drill sergeant in a position of authority, right? But the representation of I am able to see a me there, so to speak. Allison, your point of your organization, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, thinking about post 9/11 veterans, this, and we'll talk about the last 25 years, this is the most diverse ethnically, racially, sexual orientation, gender expression, like this is literally the most diverse generation of service members and now veterans in our nation's history.
Yes. And, you know, as it relates to the veteran community, there's going to be a tectonic shift as older generations die off, which is, you know, that's generational change. That's as Steve Jobs would say, death is life's change agent, you know? So there's opportunity as the new generation comes up to evolve, you know, as a country and as a community.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking about a little bit of that evolution, this next question was talking about what some of the critical areas policy changes could significantly impact that well-being of LGBTQI veterans. One of our attendees mentioned it in the chat, but recently we saw a presidential pardon for LGBTQIA service members who were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is one example of a recent step taken to righting historic wrongs. Larry, I'll start off this round of questions with you. I'm curious your thoughts on the presidential pardon. We had an opportunity to speak briefly on this before we started, but then also what other policy changes could significantly impact well-being for LGBTQIA veterans?
Well, I want to say how great it was to get that news or today of all days, since this is what we're talking about. We're talking about policy changes and so forth. And personally, I feel like other policy changes have to really relate to the one we're discussing at hand, and that is for the pardons. There are a lot of people who were discharged under different circumstances, maybe not for being gay, but took lesser sentences, if you will. And so we need some type of program in order to address everyone who was discharged because they were gay. And maybe even those without a dishonorable discharge, but were forced out. So I feel like there needs to be something whereby they can get not so much compensation, but something whereby if they even want to be able to go back to the military, that they can. And we need to do more and to dig more into why people were discriminated in the ways in which they were. I never got to go to Iraq or Afghanistan with my unit because my medical record was all of a sudden lost. And that was a form of discrimination back in the day, where you can't go if you don't have any medical record or proof of vaccinations or anything. And I was reservist, and we're all getting ready to deploy, and I can't go with my unit because I don't have a medical record. So that was the beginning of the end for me in the military because of that. I feel slighted for that, and I wish I could have retired in the reserves after 13 years, but I guess that wasn't a fight I wasn't willing to take at the time. So I think with the military discharges, though, and as a hospice chaplain, I deal with this with veterans, period, in that they're coming to me at the end of life and their families are wanting a military burial and so forth. And they're asking me to talk with me privately and say, my family doesn't know that I have a dishonorable discharge. That is, so horrible to hear, and how painful for that individual to live with that all their lives. And in talking to the individual, they had either a mental health crisis or a problem with alcohol. And this goes far back as World War II or even Korea. And these veterans didn't have the support that veterans now face with mental health and with maybe dependency issues and so forth and things of that nature. So I think more needs to be done overall with discharges and reversing those discharges, and for them not to take as long as they take. When I tell a veteran that's on hospice, let's submit the paperwork to reverse that discharge. I know in my heart that they're not going to live long enough to see it. So we need to do more related to discharges overall. And I think this is a positive event that took place today. Of course, I think it needs to go further. And again, need to revisit other discharges of veterans, period.
No, I absolutely, that's the sense that I've gotten from veterans that I've spoken to is, yes, it is a good thing, but it's happened far too late and it's still not enough. All of those things are true. Allison, I'm curious about your thoughts, both about the recent pardon announcement, but also what other policies and need to be in place to support LGBTQIA veterans.
I think it's important to note that the pardon announcement impacted a very small number of individuals that were discharged through the UMCJ under Article 125. Many don't ask, don't tell discharges were administrative discharges. Many people were discharged for things that weren't called, being gay or doing something gay, because the chain of command wanted to call it or something like it, something different that they were going to punish you for. And so there are a lot of people who are not going to be impacted by that pardon. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And honestly, some of the hardest work to do is there's will to restore those discharges, but how do you even find the people, especially the people who are discharged in something that wasn't specifically coded as homosexual activity or, being gay, whatever. There's a couple of different codes that you can actually sort people from, but their experts will tell you that there are many people who got discharged for being gay where their commands called it something else. And the real shame there is that there's harm that can never be undone because of that. And that's something that should weigh heavy on our conscience as a country. I mean, who wants to go into an employer and say, I just got out of the Army, and not be able to say, I was honorably discharged? And what employer isn't going to be like, so why weren't you honorably discharged, right? it might come up in conversation, it may not, but there are people whose lives were devastated in ways that aren't fully appreciated, I think, by most of the American people because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so, I think we have to have, there's almost like education work that we need to have for our country going forward to know exactly what we did here, because I don't think it's fully understood, even though gays are allowed to serve in the military, even though there's been a sea change when it comes to just sort of acceptance of the LGBT community in American society today. And relatedly, I think some of the work that still needs to be done can't be specified to a lawmaker, but it's just like the ongoing cultural change that needs to happen, that we won't really have arrived until everybody is sure. I'm glad that Ariana can tell the good news stories that she has. I still think that there are probably many gay Americans who aren't fully sure whether they're going to be totally embraced by the military culture. And until we get to that place, or until we get to the place where people can walk into the VA in their full gayness and not have a vet, probably of another generation, like say something they shouldn't say, until we get to that place, will we really have arrived? And so I think there is still, both restoration work that needs to be done for people who were wronged well before, I came alive, but also in our culture within the military community, and also what we're able to project out to the rest of the Americans, so that every able-bodied American who wants to serve know that they can, and they will be equally as accepted as their battle buddies.
I was having a conversation. Oh, go ahead, Ariana.
I totally agree, Allison. For me, I still have a lot of stigmatism. I still have a lot of discrimination against me, and a lot of other trans people, and that I understand. Until everyone has the same treatment and is treated equally and is treated fairly, then we are fully there. We have fully gotten to that destination. But as Allison said, education is what's really needed. For me, this is a small win, and it's a small step towards righting the wrongs. And now we should be helping these folks. But I completely agree and stand with what Allison just said. But for me, what I like to celebrate the small wins as well on my side, but I still see everything that needs to be done. I still see the work that needs to be done for our community as a whole.
Well, just to give one last follow-up too, if you don't mind, Duane, one of the things that we've gotten involved with just in the last calendar year is advocating for gender affirming care at the VA.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about education, like the conversations I have to have, whether it's Dennis McDonough or other folks, I'm like, you guys need to look at this as life-saving care. There is enough research out there that if we have veterans who have served and served honorably, many of them in wartime, saying that this is care that they need, for many of them, it's the difference between life or death, or living the rest of your life in mental health crisis. Right. And until people start to understand that that is a reality, have we again fully sort of like gotten the people who, even with the best of intentions, want to support members of our community, like fully with it and fully with the program.
Larry had brought up discrimination and literal injustice, literal like non-just things occurring. Allison, you brought up the recognizing that harm was done. Don't ask, don't tell. Whatever the intention was when the law was passed, it literally created harm, generational harm. And then Ariana talking about the small wins. Like this is we can acknowledge that this was an important step, but harm was done, and harm creates long-term. Larry indicated end-of-life concerns, but also premature crises that might lead to death. So thank you all for that. I mean, I think it was very obviously this occurring while Pride Month and while we're having this, but it was very timely. So thank you for providing some reflections on that. Now with the time that we have left here, I'd like to take a little bit about looking at the future. And so looking to the future, how can we promote greater awareness and understanding of the needs? This is building on that education conversation that we're having. That's what we're trying to do with this, trying to do with the recent LGBTQIA series that we've done, and some more work that PsychArmor is going to be doing in the future. But curious individually what you think might be some ways that individuals may either learn information, or individuals in the LGBTQIA community engage with others to talk about the contributions of veterans. And we'll start this off with Larry again.
Yeah, Duane, most definitely it does start with education. And for veterans or for military personnel and for people within the healthcare community, it has to start in their schools. So anyone wanting to be a veteran, wanting to join the military needs to learn about inclusiveness in boot camp. I can remember when I, as a Navy chaplain, went to Montford Point or Camp Jackson, and that was the place where the Montford Point Marines, the first African American Marines in the Marine Corps that were integrated. But first they were segregated, of course. But I learned their story, but not when I was there. It wasn't until afterwards, until the Montford Point Marines got a Congressional Gold Medal for their work and contributions to the Marine Corps, that I finally learned about their story. Why didn't I hear about their story? Why didn't I hear when I was in school myself and officer training about a segregated group of Navy sailors that were not white or were nationals from other countries and weren't allowed to participate in our country's Navy. So it has to start with education. And again, in medical schools and nursing schools, anyone going into the medical field, and even in hospice, we have to educate on the specific needs of all individuals, and especially for LGBTQIA members of our community, but as well as other races and other people who don't look the same or act the same.
No, and I agree with that, and it needs to be done in a systematic way, not a random way, like your nephew happened to be assigned to the basic training unit that happened to have. Like, he learned about inclusivity, he learned about intersectionality as a result of having a drill sergeant who is of the community. But if he had been in another unit, it wouldn't have happened. So we need to do it in a more systematic way. Ariana, I'm curious about your thoughts regarding ways to share more stories or educate more people about the contributions of LGBTQIA service members.
And this coincides, or it really relates to another question that I was asked regarding storytelling. The more we share our experiences, the more we share our stories, we're able to share our lives, our experiences, and the different traumas and obstacles we have overcome. That's another way for me, is a way to educate, as Larry had said, because the purpose of storytelling is not to tell you how to think, it's not to tell you what to think, but it's to give you questions. It's to give you something to think about. It's to give you something to think upon. Because the more we share our stories, the more we share experiences, we're able to help people think for themselves. Sharing our stories from the past. How can we learn from this person's story? How can we learn not to treat people a certain way? How can we do better than what we did today? How can we better treat people in the future? And today and tomorrow. So for me, the more we share the stories, the more we are able to give back to the community in that sense. People are able to learn because through storytelling, it reveals meaning. Through storytelling, it we're able to me, storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas in the world, to put more solutions. Because just me, you folks, Allison and Larry, they're sharing their stories. I'm able to ponder on it, and I find solutions as I'm thinking. So the more we can share experiences, share our stories, and share our lives with people, we're able to help.
No, I really appreciate that. I have a qualitative researcher friend that describes stories as data with a soul, right? Because this is, we know facts, right? We know the details, or unfortunately with this community, we don't know all the facts because of the way the situation is, but people have knowledge, but with stories, you can actually, empathize and actually see yourself in those situations, or recognize. I think we've seen some of that in the chat today where people were recognizing that each of you sharing your stories their own within that. So definitely storytelling is a great way to do that. Allison, I'm curious about your thoughts, obviously from your role as CEO of IAVA, but your thoughts on ways that we might educate and support LGBTQIA veteran accomplishments.
Well, first of all, in addition to us sharing our own individual experiences, to educate folks on sort of like the diversity of the LGBTQ experience. I'm also a fan of history. One of my favorite things to tell people is that Harvey Milk was in the Navy. A lot of people don't know that, but he was. So you've had gay people serving this country and sacrificing for this country for a very long period of time. And I think it's a part of the American story and the military story. And I think having a greater reverence for that is needed still. I also think the military itself, probably there are some units who do this and maybe some that don't, could do a better job of bringing outside voices inside. For those of us who served, as accepting and as inclusive as the military is going to be, we all know that to a certain extent, like the real incentive is to fall in line, right? And to like keep your mouth shut, etc. And so the more you can get somebody who has full freedom to not just be who they are, but speak freely themselves in a room with folks, I think you can begin to change hearts and minds, especially if they have a mission connection and or maybe are a veteran themselves. And so I would love to see the military. I feel like there have been attempts here and there, especially under the current administration, to embrace our community more, but I don't know if they've been as meaningful as I would have liked to have seen. It's great. You can fly the pride flag and like that can be a show of support, but really actually slowing units down and having them, engage in meaningful dialogue and not just listen to a PowerPoint, I think would be a really powerful way to begin to bring military culture along, especially. So there's a lot more work to be done there, and that's all I'm a firm believer of like, culture change has to start at the top, and that's not just dependent on, like, we need flag officers and commanders at all levels who actually think that this is important, and think that it is like a readiness issue, that it is about the health of the force, that it is about being as cohesive of a unit as possible for the next time you go to war, instead of, the school of thought that feels like this is just a waste of time.
I think that is definitely a significant point. Again, this theme of what is done is good, but it's nowhere near enough, and it's nowhere near as quick as it should have been. I'd like to pull a little bit on that thread, and looking at the time, this is where it always gets, the time is going to go. But you mentioned about Harvey Milk, very, very well known in the LGBTQI plus community. I'm curious about education that goes the other way, educating the LGBTQIA community about individuals within their community who served in the military. Is that both a two-way education, Alice?
It's at least a personal mission of mine, I will tell you. And I I am very often people in LGBTQ spaces. There's a museum that's incubating in New York. Taught the woman who does their partnership outreach that fun fact. There's a lot of people who don't know. Yes, and that's, it can go both ways. It can go both ways. So yeah, I feel like I'm on a one-woman mission to both bridge the military-civilian divide, in addition to serving my membership in our community.
No, and I
And this
think
is
that
just another way to do it.
and again, this idea of Harvey Milk is a very recognized historical figure within the LGBTQIA community, perhaps not as much in the mainstream community. Back to what Larry was talking about is the Montford Point Marines not being as well known as, for example, Chesty Puller in the Marine Corps, right? Not having that same level. And so there's a need to educate everyone. So as we're wrapping up here, each of you in your own way are demonstrating both self-advocacy and community advocacy, and how important it is. For each of you, what is the message that you hope to share for future generations, both LGBTQIA veterans and the broader veteran community? Ariana?
So I use my social media platform. I still believe that I have the biggest following for social media in American Samoa, and I use that to my advantage, not just to advocate and share my story as a transgender veteran, as a trans person, and also just to combat a lot of what's happening in our island, and also to raise awareness on a lot of things happening on a national level. My message is to my first, just to be kind, to be kind, show respect to everyone across the board, regardless of your race, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender expression. And on the military side of that, it's not how you identify that we're able to serve. It's what's in your heart that enables you to serve. I think coming back, a lot of the LGBT and Filipino community have looked at me, how did you do it? How were you able to overcome all of that? So I was able to help a lot of them, sit them down and coach them through to prep them mentally. Now we have 6 that are in the service through just me sharing my story and being brave enough to join. But now but we have 6 that have joined. Only 2 are in the Army, and the other 5 that are now going in have joined the Navy. And to me, that's being completely
That wasn't your intention.
betrayal. But I'm very proud and very happy that they are able to find new ways. I'm very pro-military. I will always be pro-military. So that's just my message, is just to be kind and love people for who they are. And stop with all the other nonsense.
I appreciate that. Larry, I get a sense, we heard your message earlier is don't give a crap what anybody else thinks, but I would like to provide you an opportunity to share what your message would be.
Just inclusiveness and working with veterans that are dying. I want to give them a voice. I want to give veterans that are dying, that are members of the LGBTQIA community, a voice as well.
Thank you so much. And Allison, you'll have the opportunity to provide the cherry on the top, so to speak, the message you would have for future veterans of all communities.
It's the same one that for all of America. For me, if we're going to be a nation that still continues to fight with an all-volunteer force, the health of the all-volunteer force becomes paramount, and it makes not only having a culture that is as welcoming and accepting as possible, but we need every able-bodied American who wants to serve, not only to be able to serve, but feel like they can do so and be no different than anybody else in the military. And so I think that is our collective work as a community, as a country, going forward on behalf of the next generation.
No, I absolutely agree. In all of this, addressing diversity and equities is a national security issue, and that's why many of us serve. So thank you all to each of you. I mentioned at the top that this was an honor for me. This has been an honor for me. I appreciate each and every one of you. I want to let everyone know that this recording will be posted on YouTube, will be sent in a follow-up email. There will be a post-webinar follow-up survey, and that will launch as soon as Zoom closes. So thank you so much for attending with us, and love to hear your thoughts in the survey. Have a great day.
Have a wonderful day, all. Thank you.